I come as a lifelong dairy farmer and as a sixth generation Minnesota dairy farmer. My family came to Minnesota in 1854 and we have been farming here ever since in various parts of the state. We settled first in Waseca, ended up out in the bump out by Ortonville, and now farm in Renville County, which is right down by the Minnesota River. I, along with my daughter and son-in-law, we are small dairy farmers, and we have a 48 cow dairy operation with 240 acres. I want to give some perspective about dairy farming in Minnesota as kind of the boots on the ground or the boots in the barn, as the case may be here. And that in my lifetime, or just since I've been farming, we've lost almost all the dairy farmers in the state. We've gone from like 40,000 dairy farmers down to only 3,228 at the last count. And I'm one of the few left, in that still most of the dairy farms in the state are small dairy farms. I mean, half or less than 50 cows, 80% or less than 100 cows, and there are only 30 dairy farms in the whole state that have that's 1%, that have over 1,000 cows. These mega dairies, these factory farms, they do not represent the small dairy farmer. And when you're looking at a huge farm compared to, say, a small farm, size does matter. It makes a difference. Think about the impact of, say, a bicycle running down the road compared to, say, a semi running down the road. If you've got a semi going down the road, it's creating a lot more force on that road in that spot where it is. I think of it like the square of the force is like that way with a dairy farm. If you've got 50 cows in one spot, they have a small impact. If you have 5,000 cows in one spot, that's a whole nother ballgame. When you're looking at review of the operation, whether it's an environmental impact statement or just looking at what is going to happen, the differences there are phenomenal. Our dairy operation with 50 cows, we have a little bit over 1 million gallon storage facility for our farm. Imagine what size you would need for a 5,000 cow dairy, and what would happen if that were to be compromised in some way, whether it was flooding or a breakout or if there was a problem. There is good reason to be concerned with an operation of that size. Size does matter. And when you're looking at reviewing whether or not you're going to permit it or not, that is the time to look at it. Because we as a governing body cannot do much about stuff after it's already in place. You need to ask, if you're pulling out over 100 million gallons of water out of one site, how will that impact the wells around you? We do not live over a huge aquifer here in the state. We have small pockets of water. Where our farm is, we happen to have gravel under our farm far enough down, so we have lots of water. You go 3 miles north of us, they have a hard time getting water. And so that pocket really makes a difference as to what happens when you pull that water out. We also live like a mile away from a small town. If we were to start to pull a lot of water out, what would happen to the wells for that town? And who's going to pay for that cost when their wells go dry? As an operation of this scale is looked at, let's look at what is going to happen to all the waste that goes into it, and all the feed that comes and goes. I mean, I look at my farm, and we're sitting there with a few acres, and we have to go out and bring in the silage and the corn, and wherever we haul out the manure, and we only have like a half mile to go. Well, if you're concentrating 5,000 cows in one spot, that means that you have to be pulling in foodstuffs, you know, your corn, your silage, your hay from many miles away, which means a lot higher impact upon the roads in that community. And that's really going to make a difference in you hauling out all that milk and all that product. And finally, I think we shouldn't be just focusing on what happens to the big dairy, you know, as far as saying, okay, is this big dairy going to be producing lots and lots of milk that we can sell as a state? That isn't necessarily what we should be looking at here. As a family farmer, and as with now my daughter and son-in-law helping me farm, there's no greater joy for me than to see them coming into the farm operation and to be able to be there with my grandkids and work with them side by side. That is what family farming is all about. And if we're losing that family farm, if we're losing that, then we're losing our communities out in rural Minnesota, and we lose the fabric of our rural area because of it. So we do not need to focus on just more and more milk. We need more and more farmers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kanne. Senator Husmick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the testifier, we just received a lengthy description from EQB, the MPCA, DNR, regarding an environmental assessment worksheets. Could you please explain where any of your concerns are not addressed by an EAW? Starting with questions.
An environmental assessment worksheet. For instance, when we put in our pit, we had to do an assessment, you know, and what we would do as a farm as to how that would impact the groundwater and that where that pit was put in and where we would haul the manure and all that. That is not a problem for a small farmer to handle. Is that follow your?
Well, Mr. Chair, I guess you're saying that we should be very nervous about 5,000 cows versus 50 cows.
Yeah.
And I think we're probably all dancing around a particular piece of subject matter we may be listening to more here in the future. Mm-hmm. My question is you have concerns over large dairy operations. The question I have for you is, what about the EAW does not address large dairy operations so that it protects the environment?
As I understand, the EAW has to be done if you have over 1,000 cows coming into one site. You have to do an EAW at that point. And as far as the EIS, you do not have to do that unless it's asked for by the citizen board. And so that if you want to go to the next step, the environmental impact statement, that's where the board asked for that, and they were asked for it because the citizens asked for greater input. And basically the neighbors, who are family farmers also, said, hey, look at us also. Don't just look at whether or not you want more milk out of one spot. Does that help?
Not particularly. My point is Mr. Chair, the point I'm trying to get to is what part of an EAW is not working to protect the environment that you seem to be most concerned about with large dairy operations? And I think the answer is you can't find one.
As it exists, it is working. It is working with citizen review through the citizen board.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kanne.